They thought her uniform made her powerless, but they were about to discover that dignity does not come from a title, a fortune, or a name. The Whitmore estate had always been a place where appearances mattered. Every polished surface, every carefully arranged room, and every formal conversation reflected the world of Adrian Whitmore, a man whose reputation carried weight throughout the city. He was known as a mafia boss who valued control, loyalty, and discipline above everything else. People respected his decisions. They measured their words around him. They understood that his world followed rules built on influence and power. But behind the walls of the grand mansion, there were people Adrian rarely noticed. People who kept the estate running quietly. People who worked without expecting recognition. One of those people was Elena Brooks. To many guests, she was simply the curvy Black Maid who moved through the halls with a calm smile and a respectful attitude. They saw her uniform before they saw her personality. They saw her position before they saw her character. But Elena had learned something over the years. A person's worth was never decided by the way others looked at them. She carried herself with confidence, not because she wanted attention, but because she knew who she was. Every morning, Elena arrived before many others. She organized the household, helped new employees understand their responsibilities, and treated everyone with the same kindness regardless of their status. She did not believe kindness made a person weak. She believed it revealed their strength. That evening, the Whitmore estate hosted an elegant gathering filled with influential guests. The halls were decorated with beautiful flowers, crystal lights reflected across the room, and conversations about business and reputation filled the air. Adrian stood among powerful people who admired his success. Beside him was Victoria Harrington, his fiancée. Victoria was admired for her beauty, her confidence, and her connection to the Whitmore name. She understood the importance of appearances. She understood how people treated those with influence. But over time, she began believing that. Her position gave her the right to decide who deserved respect. As the evening continued, Victoria noticed something that bothered her. Several guests spoke warmly to Elena. They thanked her for her attention to detail and appreciated the way she helped everyone feel comfortable. To most people, it was a simple moment of appreciation. But Victoria saw something different. She saw attention being given to someone she believed should remain unnoticed. Her expression changed. The room continued with conversations, unaware that a quiet tension was beginning to form. Elena continued doing her work, unaware that she had become the focus of someone else's insecurity. She never imagined that a simple evening would become a moment that revealed the true character of everyone present. Then, in the middle of the celebration, Victoria made a choice that would change the way people saw her forever. She approached Elena in front of the guests, and the atmosphere slowly shifted. Conversations became quieter. Eyes turned toward them. Nobody expected what happened next. When the moment ended, Elena stood there with her composure still intact. The room was silent, not because of what had happened, but because of how she responded. She did not allow anger to control her. She did not allow humiliation to define her. And as the doors opened and Adrian Whitmore entered the room, he saw something that would stay in his mind forever. He did not see a servant standing before him. He saw a person who had more dignity than everyone who had tried to take it away. That night, the man who believed he understood power began to discover a different kind of strength. The room had gone quiet, but nobody expected the silence to reveal more than the action itself. They expected Elena Brooks to react with anger, embarrassment, or desperation. They expected the woman they had overlooked to finally show weakness. Instead, they witnessed something that made them uncomfortable. Elena stood calmly, her expression steady, refusing to let a painful moment decide who she was. Adrian Whitmore noticed that before he noticed anything else. He had entered the room expecting to handle a situation. He had expected to see conflict between two people connected to his world. But what he saw was different. He saw one person trying to protect an image and another person protecting her dignity. For years, Adrian believed strength was about control. It was about having the final word, making difficult decisions, and ensuring people understood his authority. Yet in that moment, Elena showed a kind of strength he rarely encountered. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to demand attention. Her silence carried more weight than any argument could have. Victoria Harrington looked toward Adrian, expecting him to immediately understand her side. She had always believed their relationship meant he would naturally support her. After all, she was the woman standing beside him in public. She was the person people associated with the Whitmore name. But Adrian did not speak immediately. His silence created a feeling that Victoria had never experienced before. Uncertainty. He looked around the room and noticed the guests avoiding eye contact. He noticed the uncomfortable expressions of the staff members who had witnessed everything. More importantly, he noticed Elena. She was not looking for sympathy. She was not trying to make Victoria appear worse. She simply stood there with a quiet confidence that made Adrian question everything he thought he knew about power. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the mansion became quiet again, Adrian walked through the halls thinking about what happened. He remembered every person who had tried to gain his approval over the years. Many people wanted his attention because of his name. Many wanted access to his world because of his influence. But Elena had done something completely different. She had never tried to impress him. She had never asked for anything. She had simply done her work with pride and treated everyone around her with respect. The next morning, Adrian saw Elena returning to her usual responsibilities. She moved through the estate the same way she always had, helping others and carrying herself with confidence. He expected to see sadness or frustration, but instead he saw peace. That surprised him. "How can you act like nothing happened?" Adrian asked quietly. Elena looked at him and answered, "Something happened. I know that. But I do not want that moment to become the most important thing about me." Adrian listened carefully. Her words stayed with him because they revealed a mindset he rarely saw. Many people in his world allowed one difficult moment to define them. Elena refused to give anyone that power. "You are not angry?" he asked. Elena paused before replying. "I was disappointed. But anger does not give me back my dignity. I already have that." Adrian had heard many powerful statements in his life, but few had affected him the way those simple words did. For the first time, he began wondering if the person everyone viewed as the least important in his home was actually the person who understood life better than anyone else. And as the morning light entered the quiet halls of the Whitmore estate, Adrian realized that the event from the night before was not just about what happened to Elena. It was about what it revealed about everyone who witnessed it. Adrian Whitmore had spent his entire life learning how to read people. In his world, every expression, every decision, and every word could reveal someone's true intentions. He believed he understood ambition, loyalty, and pride because he had seen them in countless forms. But after the night at the estate, he found himself thinking about someone who represented none of those things. Elena Brooks did not seek influence. She did not chase recognition. She simply lived by principles that seemed almost forgotten in the world Adrian knew. The more he observed her, the more he realized that the paint on her uniform was never the most important part of the situation. The real question was why someone with so much kindness had been treated as if she mattered less. Over the following weeks, Adrian began noticing things he had ignored for years. He saw Elena helping an older member of the household staff carry supplies when nobody else was nearby. He saw her patiently teaching new employees instead of criticizing their mistakes. He saw the way people naturally trusted her, not because of her position, but because of the way she made them feel. These moments were small, but they revealed something powerful. Elena's character did not depend on who was watching. She was the same person in private that she appeared to be in public. That was rare in Adrian's world. One afternoon, Adrian found Elena organizing the library after a family meeting. The room was quiet, filled with shelves of old books and memories from generations of the Whitmore family. He watched her carefully place each item back where it belonged. "You always seem to notice what others need before they ask," Adrian said. Elena looked surprised by the question. "I think everyone deserves to feel seen," she replied. Those simple words stayed with him. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to be noticed. They wanted their achievements recognized, their names remembered, and their importance confirmed. Elena was different. She focused on making others feel valued instead of trying to prove her own value. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington struggled with the way people were beginning to view the situation. She expected the estate to move on quickly. She expected everyone to forget what happened because that was how things usually worked in her world. But this time was different. People remembered Elena's calm response more than Victoria's attempt to embarrass her. They remembered dignity more than status. Victoria began to realize that the moment had not shown Elena's weakness. It had revealed her own insecurity. She had believed that being Adrian's fiancée meant she automatically deserved admiration. But now she was seeing something uncomfortable. Respect could not be inherited. It could not be demanded. It had to be earned through actions. Adrian also began questioning the environment around him. He wondered how many people had been overlooked simply because nobody took the time to understand them. He had built a powerful reputation, but perhaps he had failed to see the people who supported everything around him. That evening, Adrian spoke with his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, who had quietly observed the changes happening inside the estate. "You seem different," Eleanor said. Adrian looked toward the window overlooking the grounds. "I think I am finally noticing things I should have noticed before." Eleanor smiled softly. "Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who teach us the most." Adrian thought about Elena and the way she carried herself through every challenge. She had never tried to change his world. She had simply shown him another way to see it. And for the first time, Adrian Whitmore began to understand that true power was not about standing above others. It was about having the wisdom to recognize their worth. Adrian Whitmore had always believed that a person's position revealed their importance. In his world, names carried weight, wealth created influence, and reputation opened doors that ordinary people could never approach. But the more time he spent observing Elena Brooks, the more he questioned the beliefs he had carried for years. She had no powerful family name. She had no influence outside the walls of the Whitmore estate. Yet somehow, she had earned something many powerful people spent their entire lives searching for: genuine respect. The change in Adrian did not happen overnight. He still carried the habits of a man who had spent years protecting himself from disappointment. He still analyzed situations carefully and kept his emotions controlled. But now, he was paying attention to things he once ignored. He noticed the way employees looked more comfortable around Elena. He noticed how small conversations in the house felt warmer when she was nearby. He noticed that people trusted her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One morning, Adrian walked through the estate and found Elena speaking with a young employee who had made a mistake while organizing one of the rooms. Instead of making the person feel embarrassed, Elena calmly explained what needed to be done and offered to help. Adrian watched from a distance. It was a simple moment, but it revealed something important. Elena understood that correcting someone did not require making them feel small. That was a lesson Adrian had rarely seen practiced. Later that day, Adrian invited Elena to have a conversation in the garden, the same garden where he had spent many quiet moments thinking about the changes happening around him. "You never seem to care about proving yourself," Adrian said. Elena looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "I think people who know their own worth do not need to constantly prove it." Adrian remained silent. Her words reflected something he had been slowly realizing. Many people around him worked hard to appear powerful because they were afraid of being overlooked. Elena was different. She was comfortable with who she was. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington began to feel the consequences of the choice she had made that night. Not because Adrian had publicly turned against her. Not because anyone had tried to embarrass her in return. The change came from something much quieter. People no longer viewed her the same way. They had seen a side of her that she had always hidden behind confidence and elegance. Victoria noticed that the staff members who once admired her now treated her with polite distance. For the first time, she experienced what it felt like to be judged by actions instead of appearances. She began thinking about Elena differently. She had spent so much time believing Elena was a threat, but the truth was far more uncomfortable. Elena had never wanted Victoria's place. She had never tried to compete with her. She had simply remained kind while Victoria struggled with her own insecurity. That realization was difficult to accept. Adrian noticed Victoria's silence, but did not rush to judge her. He understood that people rarely changed because someone forced them to. They changed when they finally faced the truth about themselves. That evening, Adrian sat alone in his office, looking over the city lights outside his window. He thought about everything he had built and everything he had failed to notice. He had created a world where people respected his authority, but he was beginning to understand that authority and respect were not the same thing. Elena had taught him that a person could have no title and still possess incredible strength. She had shown him that dignity was not created by status. It existed long before anyone recognized it. And as Adrian continued to reflect, he realized that the woman everyone once overlooked was becoming the person who changed the way he saw the entire world. Adrian Whitmore had spent years building a world where everything had a place and everyone had a role. The people around him understood the importance of his name, his decisions, and his expectations. He believed that structure was the reason his life remained successful. But recently, he began noticing something that challenged everything he had believed. The strongest influence inside his home did not come from the person with the highest position. It came from the person who treated everyone as if they mattered. Elena Brooks continued living her life with the same quiet confidence that had always defined her. She never acted differently because Adrian noticed her. She never changed her behavior because people began respecting her more. She remained the same person who arrived early, helped others, and carried herself with kindness. Adrian found that consistency impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Eleanor Whitmore invited Adrian to join her for tea in the garden. She had watched the changes happening inside the estate and understood something her son was only beginning to learn. "You seem different lately," Eleanor said. Adrian looked toward the gardens surrounding the mansion. "I think I spent too much time believing power was the same as importance." Eleanor smiled softly. "And what do you believe now?" Adrian paused before answering. "I think the way someone treats others reveals more about them than anything they own." Eleanor nodded because she knew exactly who had helped him understand that. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington was struggling with a difficult truth. She had always believed that being Adrian's fiancée gave her a special place in his world. She believed elegance, wealth, and reputation were enough to secure admiration. But now she was seeing something different. People respected Elena without knowing her background or caring about her position. They respected her because of her actions. That difference stayed in Victoria's mind. She began remembering moments she had ignored before. The times Elena helped others, without expecting thanks. The times Elena showed patience when others were impatient. The times Elena chose kindness when she could have chosen resentment. For the first time, Victoria wondered if she had misunderstood the person she tried to diminish. She had viewed Elena as someone beneath her, but perhaps Elena had been showing a level of maturity that Victoria herself had not reached. Later that week, Adrian attended a small meeting with members of the household staff. He listened to their concerns, asked for their opinions, and thanked them for their dedication. Many of them were surprised because Adrian had always been known as a distant and private person. But Elena was not surprised. She understood that people could change when they were willing to listen. After the meeting, Adrian found Elena near the library. "You knew I needed to understand this, did you not?" he asked. Elena smiled gently. "I think everyone eventually learns what they are ready to learn." Adrian looked at her thoughtfully. She never acted as if she had all the answers. She never presented herself as someone better than others. That humility was what made her lessons so powerful. She simply lived by the values she believed in. That evening, Adrian looked around the estate differently. The building had not changed. The furniture had not changed. The people had not changed overnight. What changed was the way he saw everything. He finally understood that a person's importance was never determined by their position in a room. It was determined by the impact they had on the people around them. And the woman everyone had once overlooked had quietly become the person who helped an entire household discover what respect truly meant. Adrian Whitmore had spent most of his life believing that people revealed their value through what they could accomplish, what they owned, and the influence they carried. His world had always been measured by results. Decisions had consequences, reputations had to be protected, and trust had to be carefully earned. But the longer he watched Elena Brooks, the more he realized that he had been measuring people by the wrong things. Elena had no desire to impress powerful guests or gain a higher position inside the Whitmore estate. She never changed the way she treated others just because someone important was nearby. Her kindness was not a performance. It was simply part of who she was. That was the quality Adrian respected most. One morning, Adrian walked through the estate and noticed something unusual. The atmosphere felt different. Employees who once moved quietly through the halls now spoke more openly. People who once avoided attention were beginning to share their thoughts. Adrian realized the change did not come from a new rule or a formal announcement. It came from a shift in how people felt. They felt seen. They felt respected. And Adrian knew exactly where that change began. Later that day, Adrian found Elena in the kitchen helping prepare a meal for the household staff. She was listening to their stories, laughing with them, and making sure everyone had what they needed. It was a simple moment, but Adrian recognized its importance. Elena did not treat kindness as something reserved for special occasions. She carried it into ordinary moments. "You make everyone feel important," Adrian said. Elena looked at him with a thoughtful smile. "Everyone wants to know that they matter. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them." Adrian considered those words carefully. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to be recognized, but few who made others feel recognized. That difference stayed with him. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington found herself facing memories she had tried to avoid. She remembered the confidence she felt when she believed her status protected her from consequences. She remembered thinking that being Adrian's fiancée meant she would always be the person everyone supported. But now she understood something she had never wanted to admit. A title could create attention, but it could not create genuine respect. Victoria began watching Elena differently. She noticed that Elena never spoke badly about her. She noticed that Elena never tried to make others turn against her. Even after everything that happened, Elena continued showing the same patience and kindness. That was the part Victoria struggled to understand. She expected anger. She expected resentment. Instead, she saw forgiveness waiting for a person who was willing to change. Adrian also began thinking about the future of the Whitmore estate. He realized that leadership was not only about making decisions from a distance. It was about understanding the people affected by those decisions. For the first time, he wanted to create a place where respect was not determined by someone's position. That evening, Adrian met Elena in the garden. The quiet path and warm lights created a peaceful atmosphere. "You changed the way I see things," Adrian admitted. Elena looked surprised. "I did not change anything. You chose to see differently." Her response reminded him that real growth could not be forced. It had to come from within. Adrian looked across the estate and understood how much had changed. The walls were the same. The rooms were the same. But the meaning behind them was different. The person who had once been ignored had become the person who helped everyone understand a truth they had forgotten. Respect was not created by power. It was created by the way people chose to treat each other when nobody was watching. Adrian Whitmore had spent years believing that respect was something people gave to those who had earned power. He thought authority created loyalty, success created admiration, and a strong reputation created influence. But the more he learned from Elena Brooks, the more he realized that he had confused being recognized with being respected. The difference was becoming impossible for him to ignore. Elena never entered a room expecting people to notice her. She never demanded appreciation for the work she did. Yet somehow, she became the person everyone trusted most inside the Whitmore estate. Her influence did not come from her position. It came from the way she treated people when there was nothing for her to gain. One afternoon, Adrian watched Elena speak with a member of the household staff who had been struggling with personal challenges. Instead of offering simple words of comfort, Elena took the time to listen. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She simply made that person feel understood. Adrian stood nearby and realized that this was the kind of leadership he had never been taught. He had always believed leaders needed to have all the answers. Elena showed him that sometimes leadership began with knowing how to listen. Later that evening, Adrian discussed the changes happening at the estate with Eleanor Whitmore. His mother had noticed his transformation long before he was willing to admit it himself. "You are no longer looking at people the same way," Eleanor said. Adrian looked thoughtful. "I think I spent too long seeing positions instead of people." Eleanor smiled gently. "That is because power often makes people look upward. Wisdom teaches them to look around." Those words stayed with Adrian. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington was going through her own quiet struggle. She had spent so much time trying to protect her image that she never considered what others experienced around her. She began noticing small details she had previously ignored. She saw how employees respected Elena. She saw how people naturally came to her for advice. She saw that Elena had never needed a title to make an impact. Victoria finally understood something that challenged everything she believed. She had tried to prove that she was above Elena, but Elena had never tried to stand above anyone. That was the difference between confidence and insecurity. Adrian noticed Victoria becoming more reflective. He did not expect her to change instantly because he understood that real growth required honesty. A person could not become better by simply saying the right words. They had to understand why their actions had affected others. One evening, Adrian found Elena walking through the garden after finishing her responsibilities. The peaceful surroundings created a rare moment away from the expectations of the estate. "Do you ever think about leaving all of this behind?" Adrian asked. Elena looked surprised. "Sometimes people leave places because they are not valued. But sometimes a place can change when people choose to value each other." Adrian thought about that answer for a long time. Elena was not interested in escaping challenges. She believed in creating something better where she was. That mindset impressed him more than anything else. He had spent years building walls to protect himself from disappointment. Elena had spent years building bridges to help others feel connected. As the evening continued, Adrian understood that the greatest lesson he had learned was not about wealth, influence, or reputation. It was about the quiet power of a person who refuses to let the world make them less kind. The woman everyone had once overlooked had become the person who showed him a different definition of strength. And for Adrian Whitmore, that lesson was changing everything. Adrian Whitmore had spent years believing that change was something people promised but rarely followed through with. In his world, words were often used to create impressions, and appearances were often more important than intentions. That was why he paid attention to actions more than promises. And as time passed, Elena Brooks continued showing him something he had almost forgotten. Real character was revealed through consistency. It was revealed in ordinary moments when nobody was watching. The Whitmore estate had become a different place. The staff members who once felt invisible now felt comfortable sharing their thoughts. The atmosphere that had once been distant and formal became warmer. Adrian noticed every change, and he knew it was not because of rules or authority. It happened because people felt respected. Elena had influenced the household without ever trying to control it. She had never asked anyone to follow her. She had simply shown them what kindness looked like when it became a daily choice. One morning, Adrian entered the main hall and noticed several employees working together more closely than before. They were discussing improvements for the household and sharing ideas openly. Years earlier, Adrian might have ignored such conversations. Now he stopped and listened. He realized that some of the best ideas came from people who were often overlooked. Later, Adrian spoke with Elena about the changes. "You helped create this," he said. Elena shook her head gently. People were always capable of caring. Sometimes they just need to feel that their voices matter. Adrian thought about that answer. He understood that Elena never saw herself as someone above others. She simply believed everyone deserved the chance to be heard. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington reached a point where she could no longer avoid reflecting on her actions. The distance between her and the people around her was impossible to ignore. She began to understand that the respect she once received was connected to her position, not necessarily her character. That realization was difficult, but it was also the beginning of something different. For the first time, Victoria looked at Elena without comparison. She saw a woman who had never tried to compete with her. A woman who had every reason to hold resentment, but chose understanding instead. Victoria remembered the moment she had tried to make Elena feel small. Now she understood that the moment had revealed far more about herself than it ever revealed about Elena. One evening, Victoria approached Elena in the quiet garden. The conversation was not dramatic. There were no excuses or attempts to change the past. There was simply honesty. "I have been thinking about what happened," Victoria said. "I realized I was trying to prove my importance by making someone else feel less important." Elena listened carefully. She understood that an apology did not erase the past, but she also understood that people needed opportunities to become better. "Everyone has moments they regret," Elena replied. "What matters is whether they learn from them." Victoria thanked her quietly. It was not a perfect moment, but it was a sincere one. Adrian watched from a distance and realized something important. Justice did not always arrive through punishment. Sometimes it arrived when people finally understood the consequences of their own choices. Later that night, Adrian walked through the estate and thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. The woman who had once been ignored had changed the way an entire household saw one another. She had not gained power by taking it from someone else. She had earned respect by giving it freely. And Adrian Whitmore finally understood that the greatest influence was not created by making people look up to you. It was created by making people feel valued when they stood beside you. Adrian Whitmore had once believed that the greatest achievements in life were measured by influence, wealth, and the ability to command respect from others. He had spent years building a reputation that made people listen when he spoke and follow when he made decisions. But after everything that happened inside the Whitmore estate, Adrian understood a truth that changed the way he viewed the world. Real respect was never created by fear or position. It was created through the way a person treated others when there was nothing to gain. The estate looked the same from the outside. The tall windows, the carefully maintained gardens, and the elegant rooms remained unchanged. But inside those walls, something important had shifted. People who once felt invisible now felt appreciated. Conversations that were once quiet became honest. The household no longer felt like a place where people simply completed their duties. It felt like a place where people belonged. Adrian knew exactly who had inspired that transformation. Elena Brooks had never entered the Whitmore estate trying to change anyone. She had never demanded recognition or expected special treatment. She simply believed that every person deserved kindness and respect. Her actions spoke louder than any title ever could. One afternoon, Adrian gathered the household staff for a meeting. It was not a formal event filled with expectations and distance. It was a simple conversation where everyone had the opportunity to share their thoughts. Adrian listened carefully as employees discussed their experiences, ideas, and hopes for the future. Many were surprised to see the man they once considered unreachable taking the time to truly listen. Elena stood quietly among them, watching the moment unfold. She knew Adrian had changed because he had chosen to change. No one had forced him. No one had demanded it. He had simply opened his eyes to something he had ignored for too long. Later that evening, Adrian walked through the garden with Elena. The sunset painted the path with warm golden light, creating a peaceful moment after months of change and reflection. "I spent so much of my life trying to become someone people respected," Adrian said. "But I never asked myself if I was giving them a reason to respect me." Elena looked at him and smiled softly. "The fact that you are asking that question means you are already different." Adrian looked across the estate and thought about how much had changed. The woman who had once been judged by her uniform had become the person who taught everyone a lesson about character. She had never needed power to prove her worth. She had never needed a position to show her importance. She carried her dignity with her every day, and that was something nobody could take away. Victoria Harrington also continued her journey of change. She did not become a completely different person overnight, but she began making different choices. She treated employees with more respect. She listened more carefully. She learned that humility was not a weakness. It was a sign of growth. The relationship between everyone inside the estate was no longer defined by status. It was defined by understanding. Years later, people would remember many things about the Whitmore name. They would remember the success, the influence, and the power. But the most meaningful story would always be about the woman who had no title and no position of authority, yet changed the hearts of everyone around her. Elena Brooks proved that dignity does not come from what the world gives you. It comes from what you choose to carry within yourself. In that day, the world inside the Whitmore estate remembered what true respect looks like.